Well, I have the privilege of being the director of fire for the Forest Service here in the Southwest, and it's an incredible job. I really enjoy it. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we're going with the program, and how proud I am of that, but how much more work there is to do too, to do a responsible job of stewardship with fire. So you heard previous speakers talk about the case for fire and the big why we need to reintroduce fire in the landscape, and even more specifically in the Southwest, why it's so important. Last year we burned 1 million acres was, I think, in 2011, and those were the Los Conchas that Tessa just showed you. The Wildfire was that same year, and the Horseshoe 2 fires. So these were very large fires, 100,000 acres plus. Wildfire was 500,000 acres, and in many cases we sustained some severity of the landscape in those cases that it's going to take quite a while to recover from. So we really want to have a year like we had last year, where we had these pulses of fronts coming through with some moisture periodically throughout the spring and early summer, and then some lightning, right? So lightning is sort of opportunistic in that even though fire managers and district rangers, forest supervisors are getting all excited about reintroducing fire in the landscape, you got to wait for the lightning to come. Our policy doesn't allow us to use human-caused fires at this time. Perhaps it will in the future. That's probably something worth continuing to converse about. But anyway, so you got to wait for the lightning to come, and we had one of those years last year, and you saw those graphs that Tessa was showing. But I think, over time we're seeing a little bit of an increasing trend in acres burned from wildfires, particularly lightning-ignited wildfires, and there's a lot of enthusiasm and excitement by most of our line officers, looking for this opportunity when they get it, and they're getting good leaders' intent from our regional forester, Cal Joyner. He keeps saying it's the cheapest way to treat the landscape, and that's absolutely true when you compare it with what it takes to pull off a prescribed burn of a similar size. It's maybe 10% of the cost in some cases. It really depends on what the values of risk are that surround that fire and what you need to protect. So some things I want to just talk about, and I want to thank the consortium too before I go on, and just your continued effort in bringing science together with practitioners. It's just fantastic. I've had the chance to attend a couple of these, and just encourage you to keep the effort up. It's fantastic. So just some things for us to think about in the Southwest. Elizabeth, I think, mentioned that we have a fairly flexible federal fire policy, and that fire policy is very clear about the beneficial role of wildfire in the landscape and the benefits that can be derived from introducing fire into the ecosystem. So we have, I think Tessa mentioned, our forest plans that are our guiding documents for our work activities on the national forest. When I've been in the Southwest since 2004, when I first got here on the Apache Sick Graves. We had a forest plan that allowed for some, I think the terminology then was prescribed natural fire in certain areas of the forest, mostly primitive or wilderness, and that was about it. And even then it was very, there were seasonal restrictions too. It was after monsoon onset, and that was described. I think there were some thresholds there. Really the ability to get substantial acres was, under the previous plan direction, was pretty minimal. And that first generation of plans that were rolled out in the late 70s and through the 80s give attention there as an important attribute in the forest ecology. So then we had sort of the fire use process there for a while, and in order to do that for most forests, we had to amend our plans, which most of the forests in the Southwest did at that time. Flexibility in capitalizing on wildfire opportunities. And now we're in forest plan revision, so we're in that second generation of forest plans, and most of that language is being rolled over into those revision efforts. And fire is at the forefront, really, in the conversation with all of the other key factors that are mentioned in these updated forest plans. So, you know, we've had a couple plans that have been completed, and they're very, they're much more descriptive about the importance of fire. So there's some social implications, and some of those have already been mentioned. You know, getting key stakeholder support. So for us, you know, one of those is our state forestry agencies, and I see some of them here today, so that's great. You know, accepting that they have different mandates on the lands that they're responsible for, so it isn't something maybe that they can consider, but what we'd like to be able to be aligned with them on is the need for us to do it on the national forest, and working together to meet their needs as well for adjacent lands. Community support, and this is a prescribed fire example, but it's nonetheless, that community would say the same thing. I went with my incident management team a few years ago to Williams, Arizona, where they had an escape prescribed burn, and they needed the team there to corral the fire. And about a day later, we had a public meeting in Williams, packed high school auditorium, and there wasn't one person out of a couple hundred there that wasn't asking the local forest supervisor there and the district ranger, when are you going to start burning again? We need to keep up with the pace that you guys have set up, and we're supportive of that. So it was just a great example of, I think, where we've got really good community support. Their support, you know, these are the different key cooperators, whether it's a utility company or a water utility company, electrical utility company, local fire departments, local county commissioners, folks. And the way we try to get at that really is, you know, we're really recommending that line officers and fire managers do a lot of this pre-season and roll out the maps and talk about where you might consider fire when you have that opportunity, and try to gain some, so it's a bit of education and it's a bit of understanding. Internal support, you know, whenever we get a new line officer from elsewhere in the country and they're not used to running this kind of program, it takes a little bit of ramping up. Not all line officers are willing to take those risks sometimes. If you think about it, you know, the easy solution, the easy fix might be to just go put it out and not have to think about it. It's a lot harder to think about letting a fire burn on the landscape for 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. A lot of exposure, a lot of people out there, a lot of probability for something bad to happen in terms of accidents. So again, it's an education process every year for us. And then there's the big one, smoke implications. Now, how much smoke can we tolerate in the Southwest? I don't know that we know that, but the science of smoke and further research into that and connecting the social aspect of that needs to keep up so we can be successful in our efforts. How much should we be burning? You heard it from Tessa, about 1 million acres a year if we were on track, and that's all of our different fire regimes. Last year we, you know, and this is just what's been reported, it's probably a little higher, but you know, we treated about 400,000 acres, 200 with wildfire, 100 with mechanical, and then 100 with prescribed fire. And so even there, we're still only at about maybe 40% of our annual goal, or what it should be. And it was a pretty good year, really, relatively speaking. But it's a goal to shoot for, and I don't know if we'll ever get there. But again, sort of need to keep the pedal to the metal. Program of work. So all of our units have a plan to program of work for the year, and a natural fire usually is not part of that program of work. So all of a sudden, you get an opportunity, and it requires the commitment of everybody in the ranger district, including all the specialists, so that you make good decisions on the ground about that wildfire. And if it goes on for 6 or 8 weeks, it's a major project. You know, it ends up being maybe the most significant project that you undertake that year that you didn't plan for. So usually other things have to drop off the table. Overcoming culture. Our own professional firefighting organization in the Forest Service, many of them have been trained, including myself, you know, some really good suppression tactics and how to fight fire safely, but really haven't, many of them, it's taken a little while to get them on board with this approach about how we look at wildfire now, and how it might be a benefit to the landscape, and how we might let it get a little bigger than we would have in the past. And so that's a little bit of a hurdle. Some of our workforce outside of fire that's in other resource disciplines also are sometimes challenged by thinking about fire as beneficial, depending on where they worked before, depending on their, you know, where they went to school. So it's another onus on us to make sure they come on board. Terminology. So this is a really good one, and I know we have going to have some more discussion on this on Thursday, but our people are looking for some terminology in 5 words or less on what we call this, and we have a heck of a time saying it in 5 words or less, and I don't know that we should necessarily, because then we get kind of lazy about it. But you know, we went from prescribed natural fire to fire use to managed fire to just unplanned and planned fire. You know, when we last talked about this in the policy update. So that's just kind of a question out there, I think, for all of us about how we describe this, and do we, is there a caution with that when we do that, in terms of who else we work with, and particularly regulatory agencies that have some responsibilities. So I don't have an answer there, but I can tell you it's definitely an issue. But I can tell you the press releases that, and I look at quite a few of them around the region, and the really good ones are the ones that get really specific about the resource objectives they're trying to achieve. And I think those are the ones that really help the public understand what we're trying to do out there. I think that's it. Any questions?